Hi y'all, Beats Motel here, back with another video. I am Austin. As always, please check in, sit down, relax, and enjoy your stay. So kind of starting off with a book review here, and that is Meddling Kids by Mr. Edgar Cantero. Kind of some back history for me with this subject, because this was sold to me as Scooby-Doo, but for adults. And I will say I definitely do agree with that. Um, Kind of delving in that backstory, I was born in the late 90s, so I grew up on the 2000s, the 90s Scooby-Doo. That's one thing that I just loved as a kid. I actually got to go a couple years ago and meet Mr. Matthew Lillard at the Texas Frightmare Convention. Great guy. If you ever get to go see him. He's actually going to be there this year. There's my little plug for that convention. I unfortunately will not be there this year. But again, I have an affinity for Scooby-Doo. I absolutely love Scooby-Doo. Even as a red-blooded male in my mid-20s, I still love Scooby-Doo. Yes, I know it's kind of probably kind of sad that I'm still love Scooby-Doo, but that's just it, that it is what it is. But again, I have an affinity for Scooby-Doo. So when I heard about this book, I probably bought this book four years ago. I never got around to it because, in all honesty, I didn't know how I would feel about a Scooby-Doo esque book in the adult form. I mean, just because I absolutely love Scooby-Doo. I have an affinity for it. It is one of probably my most cherished childhood memories. Was watch Scooby-Doo and whatnot. My dad, first movie he ever took me to in the movie theaters to see was a Scooby-Doo movie from the early 2000s. So again, you could say I love Scooby-Doo. But I kind of finally, I don't want to say bit the bullet, but I decided to work up enough courage to read this, or attempt to read it. It took me 3 days or so to read this. I'm not going to lie. I'm going to start off by saying this is definitely a book for adults. Not saying that there's anything really, really bad in there, but there is some insinuating in this book, and some phrases that I definitely think are geared more towards adults. I think adults will get more out of this book than a kid. I probably wouldn't let a kid read this. But again, just kind of delving into it, you have the main cast. You have Andy, who is the tomboy, who is kind of the Daphne character in the story. You have Nate, who is the nerd, is how he's identified. He's probably the Shaggy character if I had to attach a label to him. You have Carrie, who is the bookworm, the smart one, the one that should be in college. She is the Velma of this group. Then you have Peter, who is the jock. He was the cool kid. He's the Fred character. And then you have Tim in the original group, who was a Scooby-Doo dog. You do and whatnot. So kind of how the story starts off. Again, I kind of read the back here. In 1977, four teenagers and a dog, Andy the tomboy, Nate the nerd, Carrie the bookworm, Peter the jock, and Tim the worminer. Yes, I took when I call him tomboy, I took him from the back of here. Solved the mystery of Sleepy Lake. The trail of an amphibian monster terrorized the quiet town of Blighton Hills. Led the gang to spend a night in DeBowen Mansion and apprehend a familiar culprit, a bitter old man in a mask. Now in 1990, the 20-something former teen detectives are lost souls. Plagued by night's terrors and Peter's tragic death, the three survivors have been running from their demons. When the man they apprehended all those years ago made parole, Andy tracks him down to confirm what she always had known. They got the wrong guy. Now she'll need to get the gang back together and return to Blighton Hills to find out what really happened in 1977. And this time she's sure they're not looking for another man in a mask. A mad scientist concoction of H.P. Lovecraft, teen detectives, and a love of Americana. Edgar Cantero's Meddling Kids is a story filled with rich horror, thrilling twists, outright hilarity, and surprising poignancy. So kind of delving into that from reading the back description here. Essentially, the story starts off with this character who was the man caught in the mask. Essentially, kind of without really going to spoilers, Andy comes across him, does some things to get some information from him, and she realizes, you know what, we need to go back. She's known all along, but none of them have wanted to agree with that. So she goes the route of getting the gang back together. As it said, Peter, unfortunately, is not alive in this book. But as time goes on, again, you get to kind of know these characters, and you kind of get a feel for them. Um, I will say, I definitely enjoy the banter, I guess is the best way to put it, in this book between the different characters, main cast, and whatnot, and the references in this to, a couple historical, kind of horror-esque uh, figures, if you will. Again, they end up going to Blighton Hills, and they try to figure out what happened that night and figure out where they went wrong and all this. And as the story goes on, you think, I'm not gonna lie, there for a little bit when I was reading this, I thought, okay, it's gonna be another man in a mask. That's the big twist, lead me to believe it's not. And then, but as the story goes on, you kind of start to find out more and more about this mansion and this town and just the lore. And it references the Necronomicon in here, which I love because I am a huge Evil Dead fan, specifically Army of Darkness. I got to show this off here. So reading that in this book, it just kind of made me think of this. And that's kind of what I got from this. It felt like if you took Scooby-Doo and you took the Evil Dead and you mash them together, that's kind of what this felt like. And I absolutely enjoyed it. I mean, there were some spots and there's some things in here that I honestly personally could have gone without, reading or having this be in there. But I get it, he's trying to make it modern for the times. Granted, this book does take place in 1990. So kind of reading this, I was thinking of nowadays. I probably should have been thinking of 1990 and whatnot, but again, you have all this inner turmoil that these, kids, I call them kids, these, and they're my age. I'm gonna call them kids though, that these kids have, all these issues that they've had growing up, and they've kind of separated and they've come back together, and you have all this animosity and all this stuff, this tension that's been buried and harbored that comes to the forefront, and you realize that nobody has gotten out of this unaffected, whether it be the group of kids, the guy that was caught originally and put in jail and said to have been the culprit, the town, the people in the town, just the surrounding area. Nobody has gotten out of this unscathed. Nobody or anything has gotten out of it. And I don't know, I really enjoyed this book. Again, the characters, there's a couple things I could have gone without. In all honesty, my favorite character probably was Nate. Just with his, he realizes that, what, there's been mistakes made and all this. And again, it just, without trying to spoil a whole lot, and that's really hard to do when talking about books, I'm going to be honest with you. But again, Nate would have to be my favorite character. Some good things about it. Again, the characters were good. The town of Blighton Hills, I really enjoyed it. The lore, the back history, and all this other things that you kind of figure out as the book goes on and whatnot. I actually, after reading this, I figured out that there was a sequel to this called The Body's Not Big Enough for Both of Us. And I kind of want to get it. I actually would be, if I'm being honest, would be very interested in interviewing and talk to Mr. Edgar Cantero about this and how he kind of came up with the idea behind this. I think I'm gonna have to look into that and see if I can reach out to him and get some information. But just because I love this book so much, I loved it so much. I want to go get a hard copy of this book. In all honesty, again, anything Scooby-Doo related, I absolutely love. Then you take that and you throw some Evil Dead in, mixed in with there, and I loved it. And I think that's why Nate was my favorite character, is because he felt like Ash from Evil Dead. Or an Ash-like character in this book. Favorite thing that comes to mind is the scene in the Army of Darkness. We know Ash is in the graveyard and he's Nocto Ferrato. And that's kind of what, there's a scene here that made me think of that, and I absolutely love that scene. And I guess that would probably be one question that I had for Mr. Cantero was, did you have, Evil Dead in mind when you were writing this book? But again, Meddling Kids, should you read it? I definitely think so. I think you should. Even if you're not a fan of Scooby-Doo, I think just about anybody can get enjoyment out of this. Again, keep in mind, the people, when he wrote this, what year we're in, we're in 2024 now. Obviously, he wrote this before then. When was this written? I'm going to have to double check here. But again, it's a sign of the times and whatnot. So just kind of keep that in mind. There might be something in here that you could do without it didn't deter me from reading the story. In all honesty, I throw it out there just because I want to be unbiased when reviewing these books. And it's actually a Blumhouse books helped produce this, so I definitely. Sorry, I'm gonna have to look on here and see, when did this come out. 2017. Came out in 2017. So again, it's a sign of the times. Making it modern and whatnot. I really wish, I'm gonna have to check. I don't think the sequel really will have anything to do with this. If he wrote a sequel to this, I would honestly buy it. It'd be a first day pickup for me. But again, like I said, Meddling Kids, should you read it? Should you pick it up? Yes. I will say I read this in both on the book and on my Kindle. It seems about every 4 or 6 months, this book does go on sale on Kindle. So if you see it on there, definitely pick it up. $2-3. Even, even if you don't want to wait that long, you want to get it now, go get it. I promise it is worth the read. Again, the cover of this is just cool. But again, as always, thank y'all for stopping in and watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video. And as always, y'all stay safe.